for us podcasters, myself certainly included, the difference between being a hobbyist and being a professional can be boiled down to just one factor, and that's the participation and support of brands. But what is the benefit in podcasting to them? Grant Durando, Director of Offline Practice at Wright Side Up Media, has assembled this panel to discuss the growth loop, how brands use podcasting to drive awareness, trust, and demand. With Grant today is Jeanine Wright, Jonas Woost, Giancarlo Bizzarro. I forgot the companies you work for. Jeanine Wright, Board Advisor for Quill. Jonas Woost, co-founder of Bumper. Giancarlo Bizzarro, VP of Sales at Crooked Media. And from here, Grant, would you take it away, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lindsay. Welcome, everybody, to what I think is the first panel of podcast movement this year. So very exciting. Yeah, let's hear it in the crowd. Let's go. Let's make some noise. Let's break up those conversations. Excellent. Great to have you all here. I'm Grant. Excited to be hosting these very talented, smart people to talk about exactly what Lindsay said, the growth loop. We find that in our conversations with advertisers, both already engaged in the space and brand new to the space, exploring working in audio advertising, there is a bit of a misconception that maybe podcast is only good for bottom funnel advertising, or maybe it's only good for top funnel advertising because, you can't measure podcast advertising. And so we're here to represent the full extent of that funnel, talk about exactly how it works and for whom which part of that funnel should be applied. So excited to walk through this with these folks from all aspects of the industry. But first, let's do an icebreaker question with an audio theme. Let's talk about what were you listening to when you got ready for the day today? Giancarlo.
So I should say Pod Save the World because of everything going on with Iran, but I'm a big football guy. And European football, not the football you play here in Texas. And so I was listening to Football Weekly with Max Rushton and Barry Glendenny, and they were talking about the Champions League and how Tottenham just got destroyed.
Amazing. Awesome. Jeanine, how about you?
Oh, I love it. I was listening to Radio Lab. That's like my favorite go-to. Think about the world, think about things differently. So
that's a great brain rever for the morning. Yeah, very good. Jonas?
So I didn't actually listen to this morning. I was enjoying the silence, but on my flight here from Vancouver, 2 flights, long flight, latest episode of Acquired about Formula One. Whoa. Super interesting. Also the brand integrations, I think we're going to touch on that one that they use specifically there. I think they're super smart and super interesting.
Amazing.
Well, I was also teasing Jonas, though. My company, Inception Point, we also have a podcast called A Moment of Silence, which is literally just an ad and then silence and then an ad. So, next time you need some silence, please throw me some ducats and put that one on.
I'll follow you.
Very good. And I was listening to Fish Concert on Fish Radio, Sirius XM. So there we are. Let's get into it. So Giancarlo, I want to start with you. We obviously have a lot of history over the last 12 years working at different sides of the DR kind of performance marketing segment of the podcast business. What does a typical bottom funnel campaign look like for you and your brands? When you're talking about, DR, looking for sales, ROI, those kinds of campaigns?
Yeah. So for the most part, we get advertisers that come in at all sorts of sizes. We have what we like to call our brands that are anything from issue advocacy to our main sponsors, like the ones that you bring us, whether it be Rocket Money or others. They come in, they're looking for conversion data, top of funnel, sort of site visits, conversions. And, as we've got that long history together. In the past, people used to buy on vibes. Now they're able to see a little bit more on the metric side, whether it be IP tracking or conversions all the way down to, attribution for RSS.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jeanine, you perhaps incorrectly, I assume that you said at kind of the opposite end of this funnel at the top. So what does a top funnel campaign look for brands that you're working with at Quill?
Yeah, so Quill exclusively works with brands to make their branded content. So, and pretty much exclusively working with Fortune 500 brands. And usually there's some kind of investigative process to figure out why are they doing this? Who is it that they want to reach? And usually it is not that they just want to reach as many people as possible, like a top of funnel kind of play. Usually it's that they have a pretty specific ideal customer profile in mind. So, for example, the Expedia podcast, they're trying to reach hotel owners, hotel professionals that they want to participate in their hotel partner program. For the Daylight podcast, they're trying to reach the HR professionals that might be interested in HR related stories, compliance, things like that. So it's less about trying to get the breadth and more about trying to get the depth of the specific kind of profile of person that they're trying to reach and why they're trying to reach them. So it can be anywhere along the funnel, but primarily based on the specific client profile.
Interesting. And when you're speaking to those brands that are operating in that way, what language do you use around that campaign? Is that a brand campaign? That sounds a lot like performance marketing to me. So I'm curious, what kind of language do you use?
Yeah, I think it can be all sorts of different things. I mean, yeah, sometimes they describe it as top of funnel, but sometimes, they look at it as performance marketing. But part of what I think is Quill's special sauce is being able to tie together the data analytics and growth platform on the back end with their tech platform co-host, which is designed for brands, so that they can look at the data to tie, are we reaching the people and are they engaging in the way that you want them to engage for the profile of the customer that you're trying to reach.
Amazing. Yeah. I wanted to dig way deeper into that tech stack, and we will.
Yeah.
But Jonas, tell us a little bit about what Bumper does and where you position yourself in terms of the top versus bottom funnel conversation.
So we work with brands on a number of different levels, but a big part of what we do is we help brands that have podcasts already, their own operated branded podcasts is the term we use. We help them grow those podcasts. We don't make them. We don't produce anything. We just help them grow it. In terms of where it sits in the funnel, this is a terrible answer. Depends. But what's important is to figure that out beforehand and to actually have that conversation beforehand, because some brands just come into podcasting and say like, I want to have a podcast. It's going to be great. It's going to do all these things. It's going to get new customers in, more awareness, more brand recognition, also conversion. That's hard. There's a lot of jobs that we're putting on a podcast to do, right? So we need to identify, what does it really do for you? And then related to that, I know you're going to get to it, how do we measure whether that success is actually happening regardless of where it sits in the funnel?
Yeah, and for those brands that come to you wanting to grow their podcast, is there a particular archetype or example that you see a lot of, I want to grow my podcast to 1,000 listeners per episode, or, I want to drive towards this particular goal or metric? Is there a common thread there?
So the common thread is that no one, including everyone in this room, is happy with the size of their audience.
It's true.
Everyone wants to grow their show, always. And that's fine. So we work with folks that get millions of downloads, and we work with folks that get hundreds of downloads. And when we help them grow, some people, I'm thinking of this one client right now that we did this analysis with them, and we realized they had, over the lifetime of the show, they had it for about 3 years, were reaching 900 people. 900 was the total number over multiple years. And I was nervous about the meeting because I was going to go into that meeting telling them, your audience, 900 people. And they were over the moon. They were saying, you are telling me that those are real people, 900 of them, that listen to the show. And it was a very specialized show for a very, very niche audience. He said, there's only 900 people in our whole customer pool. So we might be reaching all of them. They were extremely happy. So when we got them from 900 to 1,200, they were super happy. And then we work with other folks that get millions of downloads. Another million is nice.
Yeah, and I think that's right, to kind of right size the relative audience or the relative number and volume of conversions with the target that you're looking to reach. We at Wright Set Up work with performance brands to, acquire thousands or tens of thousands of customers per episode, per ad, per week. But in other cases, maybe one conversion a month pays for that $80,000 CAC goal that you're looking for. So there's definitely some relativity to it to keep in mind. Giancarlo, I'm curious, how do you think about goal setting with your clients when we're looking at direct response campaigns? Do you work with them and advise them on that? Do they usually come to you with goals? What does that look like in your business?
I ask them questions, right? I say, what does success look like to you? So in the same way that I think Jeanine or Jonas would look at, 900 people being a success, I ask them what are you looking to accomplish here? If it's awareness, we'll put you on our biggest shows. If it's conversions, we'll flight you in a way that makes sense. But it's very similar to the way that, you're bringing on a client probably at Right Side Up and you're asking them, what does success look like? What are your KPIs? For the most part, we've done branded podcasts. We made one with Duolingo called Radio Lingo. It was about the etymology of language. I think it was a huge success for them. And, obviously we are able to launch shows with a network that some Fortune 500 companies may have a harder time and need your advice on how to launch successfully to get those 900 listeners or more. But from our perspective, it's about reaching people where they are. And if that's a podcast, great. If that's a live event, in some instances, great. And sometimes we just have to work with them, but we always want to be collaborative. That's the thing that we approached with most foresight going into campaigns.
Definitely. And I'm curious, at Right Side Up, we don't really sell very hard when brands come to us and want to do podcast advertising. We really look at it like a diagnosis, like an analytics project, trying to find out if there's a right fit. And sometimes that means we actually say no, and we say this isn't the right time for you to explore podcast advertising. Giancarlo, back to you. Have you ever said no to a client as head of sales?
No.
I mean, honestly, I have. I've said you're too small. I mean, if they're not spending enough money in other channels, I don't want them to have their first foray into podcasting be what bankrupts them as a company. And so from my perspective, I need to make sure that I'm curating both the types of advertisers we put on our content, but also their experience in this space. And I think we've done that really, really successfully at Crooked. Obviously, we did it back in the day when we were working together on the ad agency side. And I think that's really important, is making sure that people are getting what they want. But at the same time, if you have something that's a good fit and they don't have the money, you can try to justify it for them, knowing that it's going to be successful. So I've talked people into it, buying our shows, and I've said, maybe this is not the right time to certain others.
Put you on the spot here. Is there a dollar amount that's enough?
I mean, listen, I think you need to approach the space with what you're comfortable with. I would love to say what everyone says, which is like $50,000 to $75,000 to start a campaign.
Have you been sitting in on my biz dev calls?
I mean, we were pitching together back in the day. But I think that, you can reach out, you can find shows that make sense for you, that might be smaller, that might not necessarily have the tonnage of some of the stuff that we represent, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. I think the challenge is you need to be able to buy in many different ways, especially right now. And that's something we all have to solve for.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jeanine, is there a certain client that you kind of say you're not ready yet, or is there someone that falls outside of your ICP typically, or?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, certainly one of it is budget, and are they ready to make the kind of investment that's going to make it likely to be successful in terms of not only what they can spend, but like the time and resources internally that they can dedicate to it. I mean, nobody wants to build something with somebody that's just going to be a flop. So I think the other thing is really getting back to understanding why, and do they really understand why they're doing this? I mean, saying something like, well, my competitors have one, or, my CEO thinks it might be a good idea. Like, that's not really having done the reflection enough to understand what your KPIs, what your business goals are going to be, and why you're putting this together. And so I think sometimes people are just maybe kind of looky-loos at the very beginning of the process. They don't really understand why they're getting into it. There's not really a commitment to it. And those folks are just not quite ready yet. And then usually, they eventually get there. They can work through the process. We can work through the process with them. But sometimes it takes some time.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I know when Giancarlo and I maybe meet with folks that aren't quite ready for podcast advertising, Right Side Up can kind of facilitate that growth, either formally through an engagement or informally through just consulting and, phone calls and kind of developing those advertisers to be ready. Jeanine, do you have a path at Quill to like, maybe maybe they come and they say, oh yeah, my CEO wants to do this. I don't really know anything about podcasts, but you're the person to talk to, right? Like, let's build a podcast. And you're like,
Yeah.
whoa, not yet. Is there like a path to maturation there?
There is. There's like multiple stages of the engagement. So they can, start at a very limited scope, very beginning of the process. Maybe they're just looking for ideation. Maybe they're looking for a goal setting process. Maybe they really want to understand like what is available to them to be able to reach the audiences that they're trying. And sometimes, very often, we do send them to folks like you all, right? Maybe really what they need to do is start with some general podcast advertising, understand the medium better and their effectiveness. And if they're looking for, top of funnel, or they're a CPG brand and they're looking for conversion, like maybe our services aren't the exact right fit for them as the entry point into audio.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Jonas, for you, I mean, it sounds like you've worked with brands that are happy with 900 people listening to a podcast. So does that floor that we're talking about resonate in terms of a barrier to entry, or is your business a little bit different in that that floor is maybe lower or non-existent?
I'm going to ask a question that you maybe didn't ask me. Do I say no to people? That's not what you actually asked me, right? But you asked them. I want to answer that.
Yeah.
Do I say no to people? I think it's connected to what you
Yes,
asked,
it is.
right?
Yes.
I say no all the time. I'm a terrible salesperson. Most people I speak to, I say no to. There's 2 reasons I say no to. Often, so it's the number one reason I think so. People looking for magic. So again, we help people grow their shows, right? They have an audience, they come to us, and then they come to us and say like, great, I've got whatever X amount of dollars, and that could be $20, it could be 20 million. It doesn't really matter. They say like, I want to be the number 1 show next month. Like, I don't, what? That's not a thing. You can't buy yourself into like having fans, like real people loving the show. That's what people want. I want people to love my show. Well, I mean, I couldn't make the next Beyonce. Even if you gave me all the money, we need another Beyonce to be Beyonce, right? I just can't do that. So when people are looking for that magic, we don't like working with them because they're going to be disappointed with us. And it's great to get the money. Well, it's nice. But then I will get the call the next month to say like, why am I not the next Beyonce? What happened? But
we only do magic over here.
Right set up
Yeah.
too. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the number one reason. The other big reason why we say no is people come to us and they want to grow a show, and we charge them money for that. We do that for money. And I always think about if a client is paying me money, so far so good, I want to make sure they get a return on that money. I want them to recoup it somehow. And again, for my client example, who had 900 listeners, this is not downloads, by the way, this is listeners, to get to 1,200. For him, the average deal size was like, I think $200,000 or something. He knew exactly like, well, if I only get like 1 new deal out of those additional people, I'm not charging him $200,000. So he knows exactly. So I was like, okay, no, you can make that money back. But if it's like a small podcast and they come to us and like, oh, I'd love to get from 10,000 to 20,000 downloads, I can do the math. Even if you get the 10,000 additional downloads, that's not recouping the money. That doesn't make sense. So I want to make sure that it's a win-win for everyone, and I just don't take advantage of them.
But that's the key in all of this, right? Whether it be an advertiser coming in and buying a show from me, doing a branded podcast with you all, growing the show, doing all of the above for you. I think that approaching people where they are, right? And determining what their KPIs are is the key to all of this, because we get advertisers that just want to be affiliated with us because they're an issue advocacy group, or they're trying to kind of promote something. They love the network. They're super fans. We do have an audience. Thank you. But like, I feel like whatever the objective is, we just need to approach people where they are. And it's okay to say no to people, but ideally we'd like to say yes if we can.
Yeah, it's about incremental growth. It's about setting expectations, and in a lot of cases, at least in my business, sounds like for you guys too, working with brands to set realistic goals. And I don't enter an engagement until that is written down and aligned on, right? Of like, what is your CPA target? What is your CAC goal? What's your ROI target? For you, it might be a cost per listener. For you, it might be a cost per listen as well, or some other brand metric. But speaking of those things. That's a segue. Tell me about how you measure your campaigns, and when you're looking at 10 to 20,000 listeners, that growth curve. Are you measuring that with just hosting providers, or using a third party like a Podscribe or a Magellan? And my second question is, how do you think about that in terms of your cost per ranges? So as I try to grow, my Beyonce's podcast, right? Should I be looking at $2 cost per download? $10 cost per download? How much does an audience cost?
Okay, so we're asking very good and very big questions. You're asking about measurement first, which could be its own panel. I'm sure there's a panel about it.
Several probably.
There's a whole thing about downloads, and Bumper has a very strong opinion about downloads and the lack of efficacy of downloads to measure the success of a podcast. We like to measure 3 things. How many people are listening? People, real humans. Not people who download it at some point, maybe, or IP addresses that download it. Real people actually listening. That's the one thing. Unique users. We like to measure what we call playback. How many people have actually hit play, or how many times have those people hit play? So you reach 1,000 people. Ideally, those 1,000 people listen more than once each, right? Be nice if they keep coming back. That's good for our business.
That'd be nice.
Playback. Think about playback, and then we think about time spent. Those are broadly the three numbers. And your podcast hosting provider typically does not give you that data. We built our own proprietary tool. It's called the Bumper Dashboard. It's available right now. You can sign up if you want to. So we measure it that way. The second question was this cost per. It really depends. It really, really depends. And it depends on what's the conversion event here. If you are looking to sell headphones, sorry, I can't think of another example. I mean, it costs probably quite a bit, but if they're not that expensive. So we would have to think about, well, if we want to build a big audience and that audience that's supposed to get your headphones, we probably need to find people quite cheaply, right? But if your conversion event is a $200,000 deal, I don't know, on a cost per listener basis, we might be looking at hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars. We've seen that before. That's the thing.
So what you're saying is ultimately like that, we in growth marketing, we talk about LTV CAC ratios in order to, come to a cost per that makes sense. And you're saying you guys waterfall from the LTV CAC of the product or service itself into a cost per listener because you're modeling the conversion in between those events. Is that right?
That is right. I also want to say that when we grow shows, can't guarantee it.
Yes.
I know if I buy on Crooked that I can guarantee a certain number of impressions, right?
There's not only that, conversions, yes.
Right. At least I know I'm going to get impressions, right? Are they going to convert?
They'll convert. Guaranteed.
I don't know that that's fair.
Guaranteed?
I mean, you'll get some depending on what your CAC goal is, right? Like,
fair enough.
You're
But
gonna
for
get a
us, we
couple.
don't have those guarantees beforehand, right? We don't guarantee any growth
Yeah.
beforehand. It's
Yeah.
just, we just can't do that. It's just too hard.
Of course. And Jeanine, since you play in this content space as well, how does that resonate with you? Do you guys have a similar approach?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at very similar kinds of data when it looks at engagement data, listeners. Are you really reaching the people that you want to be reaching? But like I was saying, I mean, for branded podcasts, they're often doing it for very different reasons. It might be for internal communications, vision sharing, changing the perception of a product in the market. So it's going to be very different than tracking to a conversion or a specific buy, even in spaces where they are actually selling something. For example, Quill produces the podcast for the company that makes Narcan. Okay, so it's very difficult for drug manufacturers to advertise their products directly. But really, they're trying to lead a conversation around like this life-saving drug and the opioid crisis, and reaching out to hospital professionals and people who can be and amplify the message around making Narcan as available as fire extinguishers are, in our community. And so they're tracking very different metrics to see like, is this show working to deliver what they wanted to deliver, than like actually just looking at the sales of Narcan, right? They also work for Save the Children, right? They're looking at, is this amplifying their message around their fundraising goals? Is this producing the kind of content and connecting with their donor bases? Is this improving their relationships with their hospital networks? And we do that on the back end. Some of the other metrics that we're looking at is a lot of tying back to particular LinkedIn profiles. For example, we do a lot of different data integrations that allow us to tie unique listeners to specific categories of LinkedIn profiles or specific LinkedIn profiles, so that we can see, are you actually, if you're only reaching 5,000 people. I mean, we have shows that reach hundreds of thousands or millions of people, but we have some shows that are designed really to reach very specific, niches of business verticals. And if we can demonstrate that we're actually reaching those people that you really want to reach, like, that is very compelling for brands that are investing in this product.
Can you walk me through one more time? I think it's repetition, but it's a really key point. How you're matching audience data with LinkedIn data? That's really compelling.
Yeah. I should have somebody on the data team talk to
Fair
you more
enough, fair
about how
enough,
we
fair
do
enough.
that.
Or at
But
least the broad strokes here,
There's definitely some magic in there. We're tying with a number of different data sources and using pixel tracking that is helping to do matching from unique listeners to other. Yeah.
Amazing. That's very cool.
Yeah.
And Giancarlo, I'm curious, are you involved with the Bumper Dashboard, and are you looking at that telemetry data in terms of when you're quoting impressions in this, or?
We want to be involved with everyone. I mean, obviously we try to set ourselves up to be an ad agency for our direct clients, especially some of whom have never been in podcasting before. We have some clients that come to us that are like, we don't do pods, and we want to just spend with Crooked because we're fans. So we take it upon ourselves to basically walk them through this process, and whether it be using whatever dashboard, whatever attribution, I think, we're egalitarian in that, and that we want to just make sure that clients have the best first experience, and that the partners that we have that are spending a lot of money are seeing what they need to be seeing from a, whether it be a conversion perspective, whether it be just impressions numbers across video views and downloads, or whatever metric we want to call that going forward. But yeah, all of the above.
That's really cool. I mean, what a great service you're doing for the industry to be like the starting point often for people's journey into podcasting or podcast advertising. I mean, I'm sure it's harder for you from a sale process because, not only are you selling on Crooked, but you're selling on the medium itself and on doing all the education around the metrics and stuff. But, you're doing the Lord's work for us. Thanks for
I'm
that.
trying to. Like Jonas,
Yeah.
I'm the anti-sales person. I don't really like to sell. I like to let the results speak for themselves. But yeah, we try it.
Cool.
How do you navigate the conversation about video with someone who barely knows how to think about podcast advertising? I know, for example, I know Pod Save America and probably many of your other shows are now getting a pretty decent YouTube presence. How do you talk about that? How should brands be thinking about that split?
I mean, listen, you have Magellan, Podscribe. They can model what's happening. Obviously, we would love for, our partners who are hosting video to allow for that kind of attribution at a show level basis. But for the most part, I think that when you can see something, and obviously everyone's not necessarily watching, sometimes they're just turning it on and listening. But when you can see something, sometimes you can feature a product. Sometimes we have hosts that will do straight to camera ad reads. And I think that that's another compelling feature that potentially you can't measure for, but is still, I would say, a value add to a brand if they're coming into the space.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also agree that IP level, user level attribution would completely change the game for video podcasting if any of those hosting folks are listening.
I think Apple's doing it, right?
I think they're all kind of working on it, like whether it's a clean room or what have you. Jonas, since your primary metric is driving listeners, are you now in the business of trying to drive views as well? Is that the product that you're putting to market as well?
100%. It's been awkward for many of us, right? That we have to on my decks it says listeners, and now I have to switch it out with viewers and audiences and that kind of stuff. I mentioned earlier we pay attention to 3 numbers: people, playback, time spent. Well, it's the same in audio or video. It doesn't actually make a difference. Especially our dashboard, it was actually extremely easy to add video to it because, at the end of the day, we're all here because we're in the business of broadly in the business of making a thing, getting people's attention, and then selling that attention to advertisers, right? Very broadly. Well, that works in video, that works in audio, that's long form, short form, live, not live. Actually, it works across all of those. So for us, it happens to be very, very easy. For other folks, not as easy as you have ad tech set up and certain process and that kind of stuff. We're not in that piece, so it's easier for us. For us, the video conversation is very, very simple.
Amazing. And Jeanine, are you guys making branded podcast videos now?
Yeah, the overwhelming majority of the shows are both audio and video.
Wow, fantastic. And what's the most common video type there? Is it just kind of album art, so you have something to post on YouTube, or is it full production? Is it somewhere in between with a minimal set? How are you guys advising on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would guess normal somewhere in between. Very rarely just, moving image. It's either like a video, a kind of simple video setup, or it's something, more like full production.
Amazing. So it wouldn't be a panel in 2026 if we didn't talk about AI, right? So Giancarlo, I'd like to start with you. How are you incorporating AI at Crooked into kind of your operational process? And then overall in the creative production side, is that a thing? How does that impact advertisers? I'd love to just get the scope and scale from you.
Thanks for putting me on the spot here. I mean,
yeah, of course.
We've got the silent disco headphones, so we'll get this started. At Crooked, we believe in community. We believe in people first. We believe in human connection. And so I would say that what we're trying to do is ensure that that continues as much as possible. All of our sort of production staff, they have a union. We're unionized proudly. Good for them. But they don't necessarily incorporate it into what they're doing for writing, but we can use it for copywriting, research, they sign off on that. And then for our team, obviously, some of the attribution platforms are using AI to scrub our shows and to provide air checks. And I think that that's a benefit to us. We use it, probably to write emails, as everyone does this point. I honestly would like to do less of it, just because I feel like sometimes it's prompted in the wrong way. You get the wrong result. But I would say what we try to do is maintain what we have, which is a very loyal community, and offer that up. But I think there are use cases for it for sure.
Yeah, and the reason I offer an operational question on a panel about media, I think, is because ultimately it's our perspective at Right Set Up that AI can reduce the operational burden of this channel, which will then, if we have the right actors in the space, reduce the costs and the barrier to entry on the channel. Now, that doesn't mean paying creators less. It doesn't mean paying employees less. It just means doing more work that's meaningful and less of the less meaningful work. And I've been doing this for 12 years in podcast advertising. And the story has always been podcast advertising lags behind other marketing channels because it's so hard to execute. And I think a lot of this AI work, it's not the sexiest stuff. It's not going to hit the front page of Wired, but it does help the operations go a lot more smoothly. So thank you for that candor and for getting the part.
We don't want to replace people or community.
No.
That's our big mainstay.
No, but I think if people can spend more time thinking strategically about brands' actions in the space versus like hunting for air checks, I think that's a objectively great thing. Jonas, how are you guys thinking about AI and at Bumper, either operationally or in terms of your product offering?
We use AI like everyone else, just with our day-to-day, copy editing and that kind of stuff. We think a lot about AI, and we're in the business of helping our clients reach more people, not robots yet. And maybe we're going to, I'm not even joking, right? Maybe there's going to be podcasts that are designed for robots to consume, to do something. That maybe is a thing. Maybe that could be a thing. So it doesn't impact us that much currently right now, because we're really thinking about, when we want to grow a show, how can we convince someone, a human, to make a decision to actually listen to something. That's sort of the AI discoverability piece right now, but we're thinking about a lot, if I want to discover a podcast, maybe I put it to ChatGPT as opposed to just searching on Google or searching within Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube. That's the thing that we're working on. We are in a fortunate position that when people come to us for advice, growth advice, how to grow their shows, they want to talk to a human. We just know that because they if someone wants to find out what's the fee drop, or what is a conversion rate that I should be expecting on a paid ad on PodSafe America, well, you can probably just ask AI, right? You don't have to really talk to us.
It's not going to give you the right answer.
Right. But people come to us because they do want to talk to a human about that. So that is right now a strength of us. I think our whole offering is designed to be human, because you're going to talk to this person or one of my colleagues. So we're kind of shielded from this right now. And I think there will be a lot of jobs for many people in this room as well, where sometimes you just want to talk to a person. I want to go to a doctor.
Yeah.
I find my doctor is using AI, but I want to just talk to a human about the thing, and I think, doctor podcast growth in,
curator filter. Yeah.
Doesn't really work, does it? But, there's going to be moments where we want to talk to humans. And I also personally want to hear a human speak when I listen to a podcast personally. That's just my choice that I'm making. So I'll give you a wishy-washy answer here.
No, that's a great answer. And I think empowering media planning folks to make better decisions from the outset, I think that's like a key parallel actually with medicine. It's not that you want the doctor to go away. You just want the doctor to, try maybe one or two things instead of the first five, right? So I think that's really apt. Which I never thought that would be the parallel we're drawing on stage today. Jeanine, how are you thinking about AI at Quill? And I know you've done a lot of thought leadership in the AI space for podcasts in general. Would love to kind of get your quick take here.
Yeah, maybe this is the segment where we start to actually duke it out. So I think many of you know that I wear two hats. I'm a board advisor for Quill, and we've been doing a ton of work internally to leverage AI for operational efficiency, certainly on the product development side. There'll be all sorts of AI tooling. But I'm also the CEO of Inception Point AI. We make all AI-generated personalities and AI-generated content. We're now the world's largest independent podcast company by volume. We make more than I think this morning I looked, we have about 5,600 active shows. We're producing about 3,000 podcast episodes a week, and it's all AI generated. And all of our data supports that people are very happy to engage with AI generated content. They can and do build trusting and authentic relationships with AI generated characters. I do believe that in the future, I think even ChatGPT data itself supports that people are very comfortable going to AI for health advice. In the future, I think everyone's initial engagement with a doctor will be with a personality, an AI generated personality designed and customized to you. I think a significant amount of podcast listening in the future will be done by agents that are working at your direction to learn information that you would want them to have to bring it back to you to help you be more efficient and learn and consume more content and be a better person and achieve your goals. So I have maybe a very different perspective as to what AI is going to mean for our industry and the world at large.
Yeah, and I think generally speaking, the media environment is going to move more towards organism than artifact. That's a phrase that I like to use, in that AI enables content to shift and change almost in a Schrodinger type of way. Of every time you look at it, it's a little bit different based on the experiences that you've had as an individual user. And we do user level work all the time in our industry, especially with attribution, we've talked about a lot today. So I see that future. I think that that's probably pretty inevitable, and there'll be some good sides to it and maybe some negative sides to it, but it's an interesting take. So thank you for sharing that. Moving on a little bit, or maybe not. I'd love to ask a couple of magic wand questions to just kind of forecast where we're going as an industry. So if you're a brand out there listening, you know what's next. We've talked a lot about kind of best practices and everything, but it's a good idea to keep an eye on the future. So the first question I'd like to ask is, if a brand came to you with $250,000, what would you do for them? And Jeanine, why don't we start with you?
They came to me with $250,000. I think, again, we would talk a lot about what their goals are. What is it that they're trying to accomplish? I would have no problem helping them spend $250,000, but I want to make sure that it achieves what it is that they want to achieve. You could make some really exceptional content, some branded content for a budget like that, and you could grow it to find a really big audience. That's from a branded content perspective, that's a very reasonable budget to see a lot of success in this medium.
Very good. Very good. Jonas?
Can I adjust the question to someone?
Sorry.
Someone has a podcast already and they want to grow it with 250. Is that okay?
Sure, absolutely. Make it yours.
Thank you.
No problem.
So someone has a show, they come to us, got $250,000, want to grow the show. That's great. Again, that's a healthy budget, right? It seems reasonable. We would first figure out what is the long-term plan. We would think about the next year, maybe two. How can we grow the show in a way that it's sustainable? And it's not just like, next month we're going to have lots of people and they all disappear again. So what's the plan, sort of strategy, growth strategy? And then we would apply a number of tactics for that budget. There's probably a paid component where we would buy something. We just bought on PodSafe America.
Did you know that? Thank you. Thank you. I saw that.
It's true. It's a true story. Exactly to do that. The client came to us, wanted to grow the show, and PodSafe America is going to make it happen. So a paid thing and some sort of earned thing, lots of owned opportunities, might be some social stuff in there. So we would come up with a sort of a mix of things.
Very good answer.
Long term that's really my answer here. Long term, I would want to think about 1 or 2 years.
How long using that strategy would that $250K last? Would that be like a 3-month campaign, a 9-month campaign?
Yeah. Something in there.
Something in there.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Giancarlo?
Again, I don't want to repeat everything, but I'd ask the question, what is your ultimate goal with this? Because I ideally, for most of my clients, want that 250 to turn to 500.
Yeah.
And having run hundreds, maybe thousands of campaigns at this point, I would want to pick the shows that would get them there. And for us, it's, performance data. If their objectives are brand awareness, then I'll take the 250. I'll make that sing. But I want to position them in a place where that they get into our ecosystem, because our audience, we've got a Discord, I see all of this stuff. Some people are writing fan fiction about our founders, but they also mention the ads in our Discord. And that's because there is this affinity for being with people that they think that they want to kind of relate to and being with their community. And I think that when a brand comes into a show or launches a custom podcast. They want to maintain that, whether it be 900 people to reach that 200,000 person, or, we've got a pretty big reach. It's in the millions, plural. I think that for us, it's trying to make sure that they stay with us as long as possible. One of my proudest things is having brands who are with Crooked since the inception of Crooked in 2017. I want that to continue. And ideally, hopefully, once they've had success with us, they can go out and do custom branded podcasts and work with all the fine people in the room.
So it's interesting that you say eventually work on branded custom podcasts, because it makes me think that in your framework, sponsorship or, spot-based buying comes first. Do you agree with that assessment?
I think that if you want to prove out the channel, you could, but to everyone else's point, if their objective isn't to get conversions, if it is to reach a small subsegment of the people that work for them, or investors in their company, then I don't think necessarily that's maybe the right approach, but I would say that that's the way I would lean in for a majority of brands.
Yeah, for our customer base, I mean, I would say it's 50-50 whether this is their first entry point into audio or not. And I mean, like I said, sometimes people are coming to us and they're like, hey, and we say to them, hey, have you ever considered audio advertising? And we send them to other people to make those kinds of buys. But usually it's coming from different teams within these large organizations and different budgets for different kinds of purposes. And so we're usually the one that helps them like tie the two threads together.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do a lot of that work as well with everybody on stage here, of just kind of trying to consult, figure out exactly what the goals are, and then tying the threads together. My personal bias, I think that, starting up with a small core of performance-based buying is always a great way to test the channel for minimal investment from a budgetary standpoint. But Jeanine, you said earlier about kind of like the personnel investment that it takes to build a branded podcast that people actually want to listen to. I find that that's almost as big of a barrier to entry to branded podcasts as the budget signal. So it's like, all right, if we could do $50K a month in performance-based buying for 3 months, prove the channel, give some internal faith and credit, then we can go renew for $200,000 for sure on performance-based buying, but also refer out to Quill to build a magnificent branded podcast that'll actually get the internal attention at the brand so that it can be a fantastic product.
Yeah, I like that. So let's do that.
Let's do it. Let's do more of it. Yeah,
Sounds good to me.
absolutely. Is that a path that's well trodden, Jeanine, or is that?
I think so.
you
Yeah.
think- yeah. Okay, fantastic. All right, last magic one question here. What is going to happen in the podcast industry in the next 2 years that will surprise everyone in this room? Jonas, let's start with you.
I don't think this is going to surprise everyone, but maybe how it's going to shake out is going to be surprising. So the fact that the data that we're currently providing to advertisers, if you're selling ads on your show, especially on RSS, and you're giving your advertisers the data, hey, so many impressions, right? Impressions are a funny one, right? There's a simple question that we cannot, or it's very hard to answer to advertisers. Advertisers might want to ask a question: how many people have heard my ad? It's a reasonable question, right?
Great question.
How many people have heard my ad? We actually don't know that. We know how many impressions were served, how many ads were delivered, which means an MP3 file that containing the ad was downloaded. Was it listened to? Did someone make it to the mid-roll? That's not going to continue.
Can we do a quick audience survey here? How many folks have podcasts downloaded on their phones right now that they have not listened to? Look at all those ad impressions that were listened to. Right?
There are ad impressions on there that were someone paid for. They were
Yes.
never being. That's not going to. This can't continue. Come on.
Yes, of course.
This is Mickey Mouse. Like all of the other media, like if I buy on Meta, I go to Google, I buy anything digital, at least I get an impression count. Is it always accurate? No, there's ad blocking, there's people scrolling by. Of course, there's ad skipping, there's all that kind of stuff. But what we do right now is not sustainable. And we know for a fact that there are a number of advertisers that are not investing in audio right now because the data they're getting is shit.
We should fix that.
We should fix that.
Yes. And I think that critically for those in the room that don't maybe engage with the mechanics of buying ads on a regular basis in podcast advertising, it's all driven by CPM, which is a function of efficiency. And the M in that is mil. It's per 1,000 impressions. The only data that we have, maybe soon to change, is downloads, right? How many times did a server hit the RSS feed and pull the files? It's more complicated than that, and you probably know 10 times more than this than I do. But we just sell it on a CPM, and we have ranges. Giancarlo will cringe when I say this, but like $18 to $25 CPM.
Higher.
20. Thanks, Giancarlo. 13, got it.
We start at 20.
Friday the 13th, $13 CPM. So as that denominator changes, as we say, okay, an impression is no longer just an RSS ping, it's an actual listener, that number is going to get smaller, which doesn't mean that ads are less valuable. As performance marketers, we have already normalized the market, I believe, in an efficient marketplace to say, this is worth $3,000. It just happens to be a $22 CPM. What's going to happen is if this goes through is we'll have a $30 CPM and it'll still be $3,000. It'll just be less downloads because we'll be actually pricing on consumption and not on RSS ping. So very interesting concept.
And I just want to say, like, we should fix that.
Yes,
We're fixing that.
let's go.
Bumpers fixing that. Other people might also be fixing that. Maybe we don't have this solution, but collectively we need to come up with a solution. We have an idea. A few weeks we'll launch something.
And just like IAB and 3.0 and all of this, it'll be an industry effort. So appreciate you all coming along for the ride on that. Jeanine?
I mean, I guess I'll give a predictable answer to, I think it's AI, right? I mean, this is, there's more money, more people working on this technology than any technology that has ever existed. This will radically change our industry very quickly, and we need to wake up to it and wake up to it quickly. This has not been an industry that has been quick to adopt, new formats or new technology. We talked about podcast video for 4 years before people actually started adopting and moving into podcast video. We won't have that opportunity with AI. So everyone should be figuring out how to leverage AI, certainly for operational efficiency, but it will also change the way advertising is happening in this space. I mean, we're going to see some radical changes in AI over the next 24 months.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think everyone in this room should be thinking about what's the most bizarre form of media that could potentially happen with AI and then walk that back a couple of steps. And I think that's probably pretty close to, where we'll end up.
And already we're having so much fun. I've felt like as soon as you give creators new tools, they do all sorts of awesome things to blow your mind, right?
Yeah.
I mean, now people can talk and text, and with my characters, we're rolling out real-time personalities so people can have real-time personalized experiences with our personalities. Like it's really going to expand the definition of what this medium is.
I agree.
And that's exciting.
Yeah, I think that's true. I like to think about, if computers had never existed, what would graphic designers be doing right now? And maybe we're in the pre-graphic designer period of artistry, right? Which is very exciting. Giancarlo.
I'll keep it short and sweet. I think podcast consumption is going to replace television. We just announced a deal with MS Now. We're on Sundays at 9 p.m. But I do feel like the amount of consumption and, whether it be through audio, video, wherever you consume it, I think that we're going to get to a point where we reach critical mass. And if I was a brand, I would be on the ground floor right now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the audio, the more and more people engaging with audio first mediums, it's going to continue to rise.
Agreed.
And when you talk about audio becoming the new television, actual
it's
time
not audio,
spent or
podcasts, so
watching podcasts on
I
TV?
feel like the consumption, whether it be audio or video, I think it's going to surpass.
Interesting. Amazing. I think we do have time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience, if we have them. We've got some mics floating around. Show of hands, questions. Right here on the front. Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay.
That's why we put our headphones on.
Okay, cool. I couldn't hear the mic myself.
Yeah, totally.
My name's Chris. I'm a filmmaker and a podcaster, and I've just developed a podcast analytics platform to help with the gap between losing our history when we change hosts and moving forward. But how should indie podcasters start thinking about AI and all of that as well? I think, and by the way, I listen with Crooked.
Thank you.
So yeah, just a quick.
So to reframe the question, just to make sure I get it. So question is, how should indie podcasters think about all of these evolutions in AI that we talked about today specifically? What most applies to them? Let's go to you, Jonas, since you presumably work with some indie folks and are exposed to that.
Really? Oh, thanks for that. I can't speak to the production side of it, and I don't really want to. I might have my own opinions, but this is not really my thing. I answer the data side and data analytics.
Yeah.
Data, we love data. I love data. Looking at the charts going up and down, looks all cool. I'm just like that kind of person. But unless you can find insights, it's kind of pointless, right? Looking at all these numbers, look, it's going up. Look at that pie chart. But unless you're learning something, and it's actually kind of hard sometimes to learn something from data. I find it sometimes hard. AI is actually fun for that because you can just ask it kind of like, okay, this is great. What am I learning here? What has changed? And often AI can actually find a pattern that you just couldn't find because I can't find because I'm not smart enough. Like, oh, have you noticed that when your episode is that long, something happened? So for that, AI can be very, very helpful to sort of go through the data and really just not learn from the data, but learn from your listeners or viewers, because the data represents their behavior, right? Someone listened or didn't listen. That's what we think AI is going to be very, very useful for, that kind of analytics.
I also think operationally too, coming from like the ad buying side, if I were an indie podcaster today, I would be thinking about AI kind of like a salesperson, and presuming you want to be selling ads and monetizing in that way. And I would set up some sales strategies using AI that require, a couple of things to draft, and then you're sending 100 emails a day, right? Because ultimately it's a numbers game trying to get cold sales from indies. We do our best at Wright Setup, and I know a lot of the other buying firms do too. But ultimately, we've got 60 clients, we've got 300 active networks. It's hard to break through the noise. So I would leverage AI in a really intelligent way to break through that noise from a sales perspective. Great question. One more question. Let's do it.
Hi, I'm Daniel Cotroni. I'm a filmmaker as well. A question for Jeanine, actually. I just wanted to see in the future, where do you see just like the percentage of AI podcasts versus human podcasts, and like where are we headed?
Yeah, I think that there will continue to be space for real life creators and AI generated content. And the way I think about it a lot, like, the rise of animation. When Disney first came out, they were like, this is never going to be a serious medium. This is not going to be long form. You won't be able to tell real stories with this medium. And now, of course, like people don't say that about animation. Like it will rise up as a separate kind of and parallel content genre that people will consume. We focus at Inception Point most of our energy on things that humans are not today very good at, right? We do, for example, 500 daily fishing reports. So no human is going to get up every morning and record into a mic the fishing report in 500 different locations. We do a lot of personalized content. We do a lot of like edutainment kind of content. And that's typically doesn't compete with the kind of content that, folks like Crooked are making. And in fact, the kind of content that they're making is very difficult for AI to do. Things where you need opinion or comedy or, more delicate perspective, right? So I think that you'll see it grow as a parallel genre and will help, as Giancarlo was saying, expand the kinds of content that people are able to consume in an audio medium where before maybe it just wasn't really available to them.
All right. So we're all going to do fishing reports daily, right? Yeah. Amazing. Guys, thank you so much for coming to the first panel of Podcast Movement. We appreciate it. Thank you to our guests here. Appreciate it. Come find us if you want to learn more about what we do. Thank you.